once I started, and there was nothing else like it.
What are you holding in your hands now?
These are items that were seized out of Israel Key's jail cell.
Has the public ever been shown this before?
No. These skulls are drawn in blood.
The blood, where do you believe the blood came from?
I think it was Israel's blood.
Israel Keyes is a serial killer who hid his crimes for many years. He was meticulous, he was incredibly bright, and he was incredibly lethal.
And the significance of the 11 skulls, what is that?
We believe that 11 is the total number of victims. I don't think anybody in his family, his friends, his relationships, his spouses had any idea what he was doing.
It gives me the chills to think I had talked to him, had known him.
That's where I got my kicks, I guess, was being able to live two different lives and have no one have a clue.
Unless you heard him talk about the murders, you would not know that he was a serial killer.
With Keyes, it wasn't about a particular victim. It was about a location.
Why did he pick these folks?
I didn't. It was just random.
Samantha Koenig is an 18-year-old girl who was raised and lived in Alaska. She went to high school here. She worked at the coffee stand.
She was a young girl working her job. I'm terrified of what she went through.
So at this point, Samantha she's making coffee.
She has no idea her entire life is about to change in a horrible way.
No.
People never expected stuff to happen to him.
He would wait until he had the victims under control, and then that's when I think the real monster came out.
There's a specific way I wanted things done, very specific way I wanted things to happen, and I have the whole thing planned out. I have everything I need to do it.
He loved to travel.
Every time I'd drive, I'd be looking for places, good places to do stuff.
You'll see locations in Seattle, Gresham, Oregon, Port Angeles, Washington.
He would rent cars, he would drive thousands of miles, he would take people from one state and he would bury them in other states.
San Diego, Tijuana, Salt Lake City, Utah, Cleveland, Ohio, Edmond, Washington, Fort Wayne, Indiana. There are potential victims wherever Israel Keyes traveled.
Do you believe that this weapon somewhere in the United States may have been used to kill someone?
It's possible.
I had big plans for that gun.
We know that there are families out there whose loved ones died at the hands of Israel Keyes. Right now, we're just trying to find them.
In February of 2012, the residents of Anchorage, Alaska were shaken by a frightening mystery.
It basically looked like someone just literally walked out of their shift.
It was the evening of February 1st when 18-year-old Samantha Koenig vanished after her night shift at this roadside espresso stand.
She went to work that day, expecting to go home to her boyfriend and her dad.
Michelle Tasker is a family friend.
Her boyfriend was supposed to pick her up that night.
But that didn't happen. Multiple calls went unanswered. Several hours later, her boyfriend's cell phone lit up with a message from Samantha's phone.
The text messages said something to the effect of, I'm going on vacation, I'm tired, that she was just going away and she'd just left. But we knew she hadn't left. That wasn't her character. So they knew something was wrong.
Something was terribly wrong, and the next day, investigators watched it all unfold on security camera video. FBI Special Agent Jolene Godin soon joined the team trying to find Samantha.
What are we looking at?
This is Samantha. 8 p.m. is closing time, so she's doing all of her normal things that she would do to get ready for closing.
That's when a masked man walked up to the window. He wanted much more than just coffee.
So Samantha's over at the window here. She handed something to the customer. She backs up, and this is where you see Samantha do this. You see her raise her arms.
When you raise your hands like that, it's usually because somebody's doing
Something, exactly.
What started as an apparent robbery suddenly took a darker turn.
She turns the lights off.
Do you think her assailant said turn off the lights?
Yes. At this point, you see an individual jump in through the window.
Right through the window?
Right through the window.
Have you ever seen something like that before?
No. And then you see two individuals walk away. It looks like an abduction.
As the news spread,
Just please help find my daughter.
Samantha's father, James Koenig, went public.
I don't know if my daughter's being fed, taken care of, if she's still alive, if she's getting any sleep.
As time went on, there was a tremendous amount of fear about what happened and who was in our community that could do something like this.
The FBI joined the Anchorage Police Department in looking at family and friends.
Did you have a sense you were getting to know this young woman?
Yes, yes.
FBI Special Agent Kat Nelson learned everything she could about Samantha and the people she knew.
She seemed like she had a very good spirit, like she was a very kind individual, caring about others. You could tell that she had a lot of friends that cared about her a lot.
Samantha's boyfriend was quickly ruled out as a suspect.
There was no obvious lead in this case, and it posed so many barriers for us in the beginning as to where to start looking for her.
10 days after Samantha disappeared, a vigil was held.
Hundreds of people came.
What else can we do?
Flyers, hand out flyers, ask around. If you know somebody who knows something, get them to talk. We just need some sort of, it's that one lead, that one tip that's going to bring her home.
As friends and family fan out across Anchorage to try to find Samantha, the question is, could she also be out here somewhere in the Alaskan wilderness?
Then finally, after 3 agonizing weeks,
That's when the text came in that said there was a ransom note and where to go.
the text to Samantha's boyfriend was as mysterious as her disappearance. It said to look in Connor Park, under pick of Albert. It also said, "Ain't she purty?"
We just got up and just ran, and everybody took off to the park. One of the girls kind of noticed something on the bulletin board. I walk up and there's a picture of a missing dog named Albert, and right underneath is a plastic bag with looked like a clipping and a photograph in it. Didn't touch it. We called the police.
That note contained a picture of Samantha and a long typed out message that talked about putting $30,000 into Samantha's bank account.
That account was connected to Samantha's debit card, which the kidnapper had. And the photo, which has not been made public, was of Samantha holding a newspaper.
I believe it was dated February 13th, so well after Samantha's abduction. So the hope, of course, is that Samantha is alive.
Samantha's dad deposited $5,000 into her account. Several hours later, a man makes an ATM withdrawal using Samantha's card.
He has a covering over his face, dark clothing, he has gloves on his hands. I mean, so there's very little you can tell.
Investigators rushed to the ATM, but were too late, missing the suspect by minutes. 1 week later, another ATM withdrawal is made.
This one is very different. This withdrawal occurs in Wilcox, Arizona.
Nearly 4,000 miles away.
And then a short time later, we have one in Lordsburg, New Mexico, then Humble, Texas, and then Shepherd, Texas.
He's heading east.
He's heading east. We can see that he's moving across the I-10 corridor.
But the suspect had made a crucial mistake. During the ATM withdrawal in Arizona, a white Ford Focus can be seen in the background.
That information was pushed out to law enforcement across that entire corridor.
Then, on March 13th, a state trooper notices a vehicle matching that description in a Texas hotel parking lot.
And a short time later, a man comes out, he gets in the vehicle, and he starts to drive away.
The trooper follows.
And once that vehicle exceeds the speed limit, he has his probable cause to pull that vehicle over.
And when he asks the driver for identification,
He ultimately presents him with an identification card for Israel Keys.
And who the heck is Israel Keys?
Israel Keys was not even on our radar.
that trooper's instincts were spot on. A search of the car uncovers Samantha's ID, her debit card, her cell phone, and a gun, along with a disguise that matched the man in the ATM photos.
At this point, we believe we have our guy.
But now, the FBI wanted to know, what had Israel Keys done with Samantha Koenig?
The race is on because we still don't have Samantha. We have him, but we don't have Samantha. So if Samantha is alive, then we really need to find her quickly.
In March 2012, 2 weeks after Israel Keys was arrested in Texas, he was extradited to Anchorage, Alaska.
At the point, we didn't really know, was he the one who took and kidnapped Samantha Koenig, or was he someone who was just using a credit card that he found?
FBI agent Jolene Godin says investigators initially didn't know what to make of Keys.
What was it like to look into the eyes of Israel Keys?
I spent a lot of time with Israel Keys. You could be in a room with him and it was like you were in the room with your neighbor.
I think I saw it at Walmart.
And then there were other times where the hair on the back of your neck stands up a little bit.
Investigators scrambled to learn everything they could about Israel Keys, the man.
Did he have a criminal record?
I believe he had a DUI, but that was it. No crimes of violence in his history, no sex offenses in his history, nothing like that. He's a 34-year-old man from Alaska who has a construction business, small, kind of quiet life.
Even one of my colleagues at the U.S. Attorney's Office used him as a handyman.
One of your colleagues hired him to do some work?
Sure. This is someone you felt comfortable giving a key to your house so he could go there when you weren't there to fix things.
An Anchorage resident since 2007, Keys lived in this house with his girlfriend and his 10-year-old daughter from a previous relationship. Neighbors say he didn't stand out.
Nothing suspicious at all, except for that he worked hard.
But investigators had suspicions, and one very pressing question.
We started off with, where is Samantha? No one knew if Samantha Koenig was still alive.
Anchorage Assistant U.S. Attorney Frank Russo and his colleagues knew time was of the essence.
He would have been sitting right here.
So they confronted Keys about Samantha.
Once we heard what he had to say, and went from being a very happy day as a prosecutor to one of the worst I've ever had. We ended up hearing a confession.
Keys admitted he had killed Samantha.
So we wanted to find out why he did what he did.
But before he would say more,
one of the lawyers got you this.
Keys began what would become a pattern for giving information.
He wanted an Americano coffee from Starbucks, he wanted a Snickers bar, and he wanted a particular cigar. Ultimately, Keys lays out the entire story of how the abduction of Samantha occurred.
The video of that confession had never been made public before. In it, Keys says he pointed a .22 caliber pistol at Samantha.
I remember asking him, well, why did you pick that coffee cart at that time? And he just simply said, well, it was open late.
Meaning he chose her completely at random. Keys said as they walked off into the night, Samantha broke free and ran.
He chased after her and tackled her. He indicates that his plan is to hold her for ransom, suggesting to Samantha that if she cooperates, he'll release her. She'll be able to go home.
It was all a lie. Instead, Keyes drove Samantha to his home, chained her up in his shed, and sexually assaulted her. Keyes then strangled her to death. Keyes' family, the FBI later determined, knew nothing about the horrors that had just taken place.
He was talking about the murder of this girl like someone else would discuss what they had for lunch.
Within hours of murdering Samantha, Israel Keyes left Anchorage for a Caribbean vacation with his family.
And where did he leave Samantha? Where was she? Where was her body?
Samantha was in the shed at his house.
Keyes didn't return until 2 weeks later. It was then that he posted the ransom note and texted Samantha's boyfriend, knowing she was already dead. Keyes told investigators he had driven some 35 miles north of Anchorage to Matanuska Lake, where over the course of 3 trips, he disposed of Samantha's remains.
He had drilled a hole and went ice fishing in the lake, and he had tied it up with baling wire and weights, and he had placed parts of her body down the lake as he fished. I remember asking him, "Did you catch any fish?" And he said, "Yeah, I caught fish." And I said, "Well, what did you do with the fish?" And he said, "Well, I took them home and ate them." And for me, that just turned my stomach.
It took the FBI's dive team 10 hours to recover Samantha's body.
I remember I was the one who told both Samantha's mom and dad, and that was a bad day.
Koenig family friend Michelle Tasker.
He has a daughter, and you did that to somebody else's daughter. I don't understand.
You have the right to talk to a lawyer.
After talking to Keyes, investigators realized they had a depraved killer on their hands, and that Samantha was likely not Keyes' only victim.
I'm 2 different people, basically.
How long have you been 2 different people?
Long time. 14 years.
And that tells you what?
That he had been a serial killer for 14 years.
Special Agent Catherine Nelson knew every aspect of Keyes' life needed to be examined.
Cleveland, Ohio.
So she started a deep dive into his paper trail.
Cell phone records, financial records, anything we could find out about his background, his travels, anything that would just tell us a better story about him.
It was starting to look like Keyes could have victims across the United States.
We know that Israel Keyes traveled to places such as Washington, California, Wyoming, Texas, Vermont.
We'll get the whole story eventually.
And he teased his interrogators with details of other murders.
I'll tell you about everything, or give you every single gory detail you want.
But before Keyes would agree to do that, he wanted something extraordinary in return.
I want an execution date.
For you?
Yes.
And he said, "I want a promise that I'll get the death penalty. If you do that, then I'll tell you about all the people I killed." What we said is, the more murders you give us, the more likely it is that they're going to want to impose the death penalty on you.
But without a guarantee of death, Keyes was reluctant to say anything more.
So give me something to work with, hold a bunch of your cards back, but give me a card.
Finally, Keyes folded.
All right, I'll give you 2 bodies and a name.
Hey, Israel, how you doing? All right.
Something to eat?
No, I'm fine.
Candy bar or nothing?
They are odd moments to see.
Swear off those candy bars?
Yeah,
It's in the fridge. Tell you I'm gonna eat it.
Investigators casually bonding with their interview guest.
But get him a cigar. You wanna? Says we got you over here.
Awesome. Wow, a cigar for nothing.
In some ways, to the outsider, it looked like you guys were in a way befriending a serial killer.
Yeah.
Can you give me like an hour on the internet, maybe?
Sure.
But there was method to this madness, says Assistant U.S. Attorney Frank Russo.
It was just the act that we had to put on when we went in that room. It was just trying to kind of do anything we could to get information.
Israel Keys voluntarily granted 24 interviews to various investigators in the 7 months after his arrest.
Is it true he could have walked out at any time?
Sure.
FBI Special Agent Jolene Godin.
I think he wanted to tell the story. He wanted to talk about what he did.
Even my own family pretty much as soon as I did it. So.
He enjoyed the rush. He enjoyed the thrill of it.
That strategy paid off when Keys gave up the names of 2 victims, a married couple more than 4,000 miles from Anchorage in Vermont.
He gave us the names of the people. We wrote them down.
And what was the couple's name?
Bill and Lorraine Currier.
Do your intel guys immediately try to find out if there's a missing couple?
Absolutely.
What do you learn?
Right away that Bill and Lorraine are missing.
And have been missing for some time.
Correct. Bill and Lorraine Currier are a couple that lived in Essex, Vermont. Nothing stands out really about them. They were just kind of living their life.
The Curriers vanished on a night in June 2011, leaving their family bewildered.
We love them both with all our hearts. We're devastated by their disappearance and in fear for their lives.
After interviewing neighbors, police drew this sketch of a possible suspect.
Police say this composite sketch of a man who may have been seen driving the couple's dark green Saturn sedan is a big break.
But the case went cold for nearly a year until Keys laid out the roadmap of what had happened.
He flew into Chicago and he drove east. He intended on that trip to commit a homicide. He didn't know who it would be yet.
On that trip, Keys stayed at this hotel in Essex, Vermont. While there, he dug up a bucket, similar to this one that he had buried a few years prior.
So this is just the standard orange Home Depot bucket.
For the first time, the FBI is showing 48 Hours.
These are several boxes of .22 ammunition.
The contents of what Keys like to call a kill cache.
So he would pre-position these caches, and then when the urge came upon him, if he happened to be in that state, he had his tools of destruction ready to go.
Correct. Or he'd plan a trip to a particular state knowing he already had a cache there. He didn't know who he was going to kill, but he already knew that he had the items there that he needed. We have the silencer for the .22. We have a wood stock for a .22, a plastic stock for a .22, a portion of a .22 rifle, and then we have the drum magazine, the .22.
Had a number of .22 caliber bullets.
That's correct.
You ever seen anything like this in your career?
No.
The cache used in the Currier attack has never been found, but Keys told the FBI where they could find this, a weapon he had used in Vermont.
This is a silencer that he's actually constructed himself.
With his murderous tools in hand, Keys went hunting for victims and found himself outside the Currier house.
I decided I was going to look for a house with a couple in it. I was looking for a fairly easy way to get into the garage, and theirs was the first house I found that had all those things.
He just happens to take a walk from his hotel into a neighborhood, and this unsuspecting couple, just living their lives, is about to have a monster at their door.
Yeah.
The monster didn't knock.
He's very quickly in the house. He restrains Bill and Lorraine very quickly.
You just make sure they know right away who's in charge and immediately tie him up.
And then he moves them to their car and he drives them to an abandoned farmhouse that he had scoped out earlier. Keys attacks Lorraine first. She's upstairs in the bedroom. He had restrained Bill downstairs.
But the Curriers were not going down without a fight.
Bill's yelling for his wife. Bill ultimately starts to break free from the restraints, and Keys has to go back downstairs in order to restrain him again.
And what happens down there?
There's a struggle that ensues.
So I knew I was either going to have to knock him out or just kill him. He saw the gun, he started to say something, and it just pissed me off, and I just started pulling the trigger.
Do you think this silencer might have been used in the murder of Bill Currier?
I think it's very likely.
Keys then strangled Lorraine Currier and left the couple in the basement of the abandoned farmhouse.
Did anyone ever find these bodies?
No. A short time after this happened, the house ended up being demolished and it was taken to the landfill. We made numerous attempts at the landfill. It was, I believe, a 10 or 12-week search at the landfill. The FBI was searching in an attempt to find them, but we were not able to recover their bodies.
But as meticulous as Keyes was in covering his tracks, he slipped up.
This is the one item in all the things that we found that belonged to Keyes that actually had his fingerprint on it. There's a perfect right thumbprint for Israel Keyes.
Yeah, right.
No, there is. I don't have the lab report.
Wow. Yeah, I'm impressed. Well, I'm disappointed in myself mostly, but I'm excited.
What other clues had Keyes left behind? What other murders had he committed? Investigators began focusing on his time in Washington State, where Keyes was raised, a place where he would admit to killing at least 4 more people.
Were any of those victims shot? Strangled?
We'll get the whole story eventually. For as far back as I can remember. But, you know, that's where I get a lot of the ideas. Either fishing or out hunting. See somebody in the woods.
To understand Israel Keyes, you have to go deep into the vast, remote wilderness where he was raised, the place where he lived off and on for more than 20 years, Washington State.
How many people in the state of Washington do you believe Israel Keyes killed?
We believe he killed 4 victims total in Washington State.
FBI Special Agents Ted Holla and Colleen Sanders first questioned Keyes in 2012. They have spent 8 years investigating his life and crimes in Washington, searching for more victims.
This is like a horror movie, isn't it?
It's very much like a horror movie.
The opening scenes of Keyes' life took place in a secluded cabin outside the small town of Colville.
He grew up poor. He grew up in a large family. There were 10 children in all, and they kind of lived apart from society.
John, where are we heading now?
So we're heading north out of Colville. We're going to go see if we can find where Israel Keyes grew up.
Just right up here on the right.
John Smith and his wife Desiree knew Israel Keyes when he was a teenager. Desiree hasn't been in this area since she was 15.
Yes, this could be it. Yeah, I remember it being long and steep and kind of headed up the mountainside. And yeah, it was completely impassable through most of the winter.
It was built to be completely off the grid, to be completely isolated from society.
No radio, no television,
no
electricity,
no,
nothing.
The Keyes family attended a church that preached Christian identity theology, a philosophy John and Desiree were also raised on, but have since disavowed.
Christian identity theology is very white supremacist. They come from the perspective that the other races are subhuman.
So with Israel Keyes, specifically, he could dehumanize anybody if they rejected his worldview.
Schooled at home, cut off from the outside world, Keyes was socially awkward.
Very quiet, very loner-ish, standoffish. It's hard to explain how he made me feel, but I felt unsafe being near him.
So one specific conversation about killing a deer, he said that the initial shot didn't kill it, and so when he arrived, he started to gut the thing while it was alive.
This is interrogation audio of Keyes describing himself.
I've known since I was 14 that there were things that I thought were normal and that were okay that nobody else seems to think are normal and okay.
Yeah. But just when Keyes committed his first murder is still an open question.
Whose picture are you holding?
My daughter, Julie Marie Harris. She was 12 years old and disappeared on March 3rd, 1996.
Sherry Odegaard says her daughter Julie, a Special Olympics athlete with prosthetic feet, vanished from Colville while waiting for a ride to church.
Then I went up and down every street in this town and screamed her name.
And there was no trace?
No, there was no trace.
Israel Keys, then 18 years old, lived in the area at the time. Julie's prosthetic feet were discovered at the mouth of the Colville River. The next year, her skeletal remains were found.
We asked Israel Keys about Julie Harris and her death, and he said he was aware of it, but that he was not involved in it.
I remember the name, I don't remember the details of the story.
Keys told investigators the birth of his daughter convinced him to never target children.
Something kind of changed in the way I thought, and I didn't want to do anything that would mess with kids or whatever.
But Keys' daughter was born after Julie Harris was murdered. 48 Hours tracked down friends of Julie who had never spoken with law enforcement. One of those friends told us she remembers Keys talking to Julie at the pool where she often swam.
And that Julie ended up giving him her address and phone number. Have you heard this?
No, I did not know that.
Does that sound tantalizing as a possible clue?
Like any other lead that we have, we would want to investigate it fully. We would certainly be interested in talking with her.
People have wondered if your daughter was the very first victim of Israel Keys.
And I'm wondering that too.
Despite the intrigue surrounding Julie Harris, Keys claims his first attempted murder came in 1997 or 1998, when he abducted and sexually assaulted a young woman near Bend, Oregon.
It was weird. I mean, she was scared, but also just talking. So it's like about random stuff. I don't know. It was weird. I was just convinced that I had screwed up that time in Oregon because, I let her go.
He indicated he never let another go after that.
Sometime after that assault, Keys joined the U.S. Army.
Our investigation led us to believe that he was a model soldier and excelled in the Army.
Keys told investigators he waited until he completed a 3-year stint in the Army before he stalked his next victim.
And you had told us it wasn't long when you got out of the military that you killed somebody, and it was that sort of feeling that you needed to do something. It was hard to resist.
Nia Bay, at the farthest northwestern tip of Washington, is best known as home to the Macaw tribe, legendary whale hunters. Keys moved here after marrying a tribe member he met online. They started a family.
He lived there, he rented the house out.
Eric Johnson worked with Keys at the Parks and Recreation Department.
This is his shop here in the blue part.
The blue part, that was his shop. That's where he worked.
Yeah.
There are reminders of Keys' skilled carpentry all around town, including this structure.
He was a great family guy, a smart guy, gifted carpenter, well-spoken.
An upstanding member of the community.
Upstanding member of the community, yeah.
I would do something, and then I would go back like business as usual and go out with friends, go out to bars. For all the years they've known me, they actually don't know me at all, really.
About 60 miles southeast of Nia Bay is another spectacular location, one of the deepest lakes in the United States, which investigators suspect is also a watery grave.
You guys know about Lake Crescent in Washington?
He revealed to us that one of the Washington State victims was actually, their body was sunk in this particular lake.
I think that lake is 500 to 700 feet deep.
Here's a picture of Israel Keys' boat.
Sometime in 2005 or 2006, Keys had a body in this boat.
Any idea who this person may be? Any idea how this person was killed?
No.
How long does a body last in a freshwater lake?
In the last months of 2012, Special Agents Halla and Sanders were hopeful that Keys would give them more information on who is at the bottom of this lake. But the killer had another plan.
I can't be satisfied sitting in prison for all my life. I'd rather go out while I still have some sanity, good memories. really think I'm gonna feel like when you need more information?
After 7 months of interrogations, 7 months of teasing investigators with bits and pieces of his violent past, Israel Keyes decided to take one more life, his own.
Serial killer Israel Keyes was found dead at the Anchorage Correctional Complex.
We received a call early in the morning that on December 1st, 2012, Israel Keyes had committed suicide in his jail cell.
He used a disposable razor to slit his wrist, and Keyes attempted to strangle himself with bedding.
And what was your reaction to that?
My reaction was a lot of these secrets are going to die with him now.
For Samantha Koenig's loved ones, the news hit like a gut punch.
He should have been executed. Now, he killed himself. That's great. It's not what we wanted. We wanted him to stand trial. We wanted him to answer for what he did. But the world's better off. He's gone.
Inside Keyes' cell, jailers discovered a bizarre, blood-soaked suicide note with passages like, "Crushed like a bug, you still die."
We had hoped that that note was going to be clues and tips for us on, and that he was finally going to give us all of the information on the homicides. And it really wasn't. It was kind of a rant.
But the end of Keyes was by no means the end of this case. A few months before his suicide, investigators found those macabre drawings.
He drew a series of 11 skulls, and these were found underneath his bed in his jail cell.
Drawn in Israel Keyes' own blood.
You have 11 skulls. What does this mean?
I think this is the entirety of his crimes.
And it indicates that there are 7 victims we don't have identified.
Prior to his death, Keyes had pointed the FBI to another victim.
There's one in New York.
He refused to provide that victim's name, but investigators believe it happened when Keyes took a road trip through New York State in the spring of 2009. So they combed through missing persons reports and Keyes' computer.
Is this the person buried in New York?
No.
Her name was on your computer.
Which computer? Mine?
When they confronted him with photos, one in particular rattled him. It was a photo of a woman named Deborah Feldman.
Given the way he looked at it and he started shaking a little bit, I would say she is definitely one of his victims.
Deborah Feldman is a woman who went missing from New Jersey. It was in 2009. Her body has never been recovered. We're relatively confident about Deborah Feldman. However, we do not have any forensic evidence to make that connection.
According to the FBI, that would make Deborah Feldman Keyes' 4th known victim, along with Samantha Koenig and Bill and Lorraine Currier. Agents are now determined to identify the remaining 7. And there are clues that point to at least 2 other states.
Tell me about Wyoming and what was there for him.
The Green River in Wyoming is where Keyes had buried his cashmere.
Is there a sense that there may be a body somewhere near that river?
We have a strong suspicion that Keyes may have a victim located in that area.
In the late 2000s, Israel Keyes also spent time in California's wine country, including visiting the posh Sonoma town of Healdsburg in May of 2007.
Keyes has often talked to investigators about using boats and also kayaks in the disposal of bodies. We know that he rented a single-person kayak in Healdsburg near a campground during that time in 2007.
But Keyes' road trips weren't limited to the U.S.
In 2007, he drove along the Alcan Highway by himself for about a week of that year.
The Alcan Highway goes through Canada up to Alaska.
Yes, correct. We know that Keyes traveled to Canada quite extensively and specifically said that he would go to Montreal.
When he was asked about whether he'd killed anyone in Canada, what did he say?
He said, "Canadians don't count."
It's been several years since Israel Keyes killed himself. The FBI hopes investigators across the country will take a second look at suspicious deaths in their area. They're also hoping the public can help.
If anyone has any information on Israel Keys and his travels, or if they have a family member that they think may have been potentially a victim of Israel Keys, that they come forward to the FBI with that information.
That includes the Lake Crescent area of Washington State, where Keys told investigators he had dumped a body.
We absolutely want people to come forward who think they may have seen something connected to Israel Keys, especially on this lake.
And what about those kill caches buried throughout the country?
If anyone out there comes across one of these, what should they do?
First, for people not to touch too much and not to contaminate it too much, and definitely contact local law enforcement in their community who can then reach out to us.
For the FBI, their focus is clear.
For me, the important thing is Samantha and Bill and Lorraine and Deborah and all the victims that we don't have identified. That's what this case is about.
And their commitment unwavering.
Do you have an optimistic streak that says we can find answers to the other 7 cases?
I do. I absolutely do. And it won't be easy by any means. And it may take a long time, but I'll never give up trying.
July 1997. 911 emergency. Samantha shot. Gianni Versace.
There's something inherently sexy in a Versace design. There is a flamboyance that is contained and controlled. The clothes we wear send a message about how the world perceives us.
It's just a real wow factor.
I'm Tim Gunn, and I am the mentor on Project Runway. The Versace customer was not faint of heart. One of the most iconic Versace pieces was the gown that he made for Elizabeth Hurley. 2 stars were born with that dress. Princess Diana wanted a whole new look for the world, and Courtney loved it also. I mean, he took her from trashy to sophisticated.
Versace helped put Miami on the international map. My name is Tara Solomon, and I am the Miami Herald's former nightlife correspondent. Versace brought his entire world of fabulosity. And while he may have had homes all around the world, he came to Miami Beach to relax.
Do you remember where you were when you heard that Versace had been murdered?
Oh, I remember profoundly. I opened up my computer and it flashed before me that Gianni Versace had been murdered. I was stunned.
When Versace was killed, there was pure pandemonium.
On that particular morning, Gianni Versace decided to go over to the News Cafe, and it was on his return home, approaching the door, he was shot and killed.
And all of a sudden we hear bang, bang, 2 shots.
1116 Ocean. Yes, Samantha shot. Please, immediately, please.
Do you remember where roughly he was?
He was right here.
And there was obviously blood.
Yes, plenty of blood.
And if you mention Gianni Versace, people still don't remember those names of the first few people that were killed.
There was the homicide of Jeff Trail and David Mattson. There was the murder of Lee Miglin Then there was the murder of William Reese. We have what we typically call a spree killer. This wasn't a haphazard crime. Mr. Versace was targeted.
World-famous fashion designer Gianni Versace fatally shot.
Gunned down outside his mansion in Miami Beach, Florida.
Turned into a gruesome crime scene early this morning.
5 days before he was murdered, Gianni Versace and his partner Antonio D'Amico had arrived at Casa Casuarina, their lavish Miami Beach retreat. They'd been in Paris and New York. Versace could not have known it, but his killer was already in town. The 911 call came in about 8:45 the morning of July 15th, 1997, just as Carlos Noriega, then a lieutenant with the Miami Beach Police Department, was heading to work.
I drove over to the scene and encountered an area just flooded with police officers. There was evidence at the front steps, there was blood, there was clothing. Gianni Versace was an icon. You have a world-renowned fashion designer, a celebrity, who was tragically killed. This was all hands on deck.
Yeah, you don't want to screw this case up.
Exactly.
It all happened in broad daylight. Versace had gone out alone to a local cafe to buy magazines, and then he walked home.
As he was putting the key in the door lock, he was shot twice. Once in the face, point-blank range, and the other one was behind the left ear in the neck, and that was a through-and-through shot.
Noriega believes the gunman approached Versace from behind or from the side.
I believe he was shadowing him. It was a very strategically timed, strategically placed attack to kill Gianni Versace.
The question was, who would want to kill him?
One of the first motives that we felt was a possibility was that it was a contract hit or organized crime, mafia, if you will, because there was a dead bird found next to the body.
Is that a sign?
To us, that's a sign of a mafia hit.
But the bird, it turned out, was in the wrong place at the wrong time, hit by a fragment from a bullet that killed Versace. And that left police with not much to go on. But not for long. They got a break from Lazzaro Quintana, who was a friend of Versace's.
He used to call me Lazzaretta.
Lazzaro was at the mansion that morning. He was in the dining room with Antonio when he heard the shots.
But Antonio got up and he went to the window that faces the gate to enter the mansion. And he yelled out, "No, no." And I ran out.
You came here?
I came here. Johnny was right here.
Versace was already dead on the front steps.
And then Antonio came and he's crying and he was destroyed. He was destroyed. And he's who did this? Who did this? And there was a lady standing here and she's pointing, but she couldn't speak. Antonio said, "Go get him." So I went after him.
Lazzaro followed the gunman.
We're talking this pace, real fast. I yelled, "You bastard, why did you do this? Why did you do this?" He makes a left turn. As he makes the left turn, yes, he makes the left turn, and we're still going all the way through. He turns over to the right, and car's coming, so I couldn't get across. Car stops, and they yell, "He's got a gun." He stops right across here at the alley, and that's when he's pointing the gun at me.
Show me how he pointed the gun at you, if I'm you. So he didn't even look at you?
No, never looked at...
You never saw his face?
I never saw his face.
But you saw his clothes?
Yes.
The shooter cut through this alley while Lazaro raced around the corner. He remembered seeing a police officer there earlier.
I reached him and I said to him, Mr. Versace has just been shot.
Were you calm, or were you?
No.
No?
No. A friend of mine was just shot. No, was I calm? I was nervous. I was upset.
You came down this street with the police officer.
I did.
Luckily, he came upon some men in front of this building and asked them if they saw a man running.
And they pointed. They pointed to the garage.
He said he went in here.
He went in here. So that's when I told the officer, I said, he's in there, go get him, go get him. And then we heard over the radio the commotion and okay, now there is a manhunt.
When police searched the 13th Street garage, they discovered a pile of clothes, a gray t-shirt and black shorts, just what Lazaro had seen the shooter wearing. He had obviously changed clothes. When he walked out of this garage just shortly after the murder, nobody knew who the shooter was, nobody knew what he looked like, nobody knew what he was wearing. He was able to just vanish. But he left a mountain of evidence for investigators. Next to that pile of clothes was a truck that had been reported stolen in New Jersey. And inside the truck were documents with a name. I mean, he left his identification in the truck?
That's correct. He had his passport, ID, a whole lot of items that connected him right away.
By 12 noon, some 3 hours after Gianni Versace was murdered, police had a suspect. His name, Andrew Cunanan. And as it turned out, the Miami Beach Police Department was not the only one looking for him.
In Milan, Italy today, those who knew and admired Gianni Versace said goodbye to the murdered fashion designer.
1 week after Gianni Versace was murdered, celebrities and friends from around the world gathered inside this Gothic cathedral in Milan, Italy, for his funeral.
I saw Versace's funeral on television and I cried. It was hard, it was tough. Princess Diana was there at the funeral, Sting, Trudy, Elton.
In Miami, not far from where he was murdered, there was a small, intimate service to celebrate the designer's life. The flowers left on the steps of Versace's opulent mansion served as one somber reminder of what had happened.
We consider Andrew Cunanan to be armed and to be extremely dangerous.
The police activity was another. They were tracking every lead they could, hunting for Gianni Versace's suspected killer, 27-year-old Andrew Cunanan.
You had a very good suspect.
Michael Band was the prosecutor assigned to this case.
And our first step was to go out into community with pictures of Cunanan and start beating the bushes and looking for this guy, looking to figure out, is this the guy?
Authorities were starting to learn all about Andrew Cunanan. 3 months before Versace's murder, Cunanan was living in San Diego, and his life was, to say the least, complicated.
I thought he'd be a very successful businessman, or maybe in the fashion industry, or something star quality like.
Back in the 80s, Robert Aarons remembers his 7th grade classmate Andrew Cunanan as a good-looking kid with a keen fashion sense.
I remember Andrew would put dimes in his penny loafers. It was always that little extra something that made him sort of stand out and get noticed. Andrew sort of had this air about him that I thought was kind of beyond his years at that time.
According to Aarons, Andrew Cunanan grew up in a working-class San Diego suburb and did not share much about his home life.
I had no idea who his mom was, his dad, whether he had brothers or sisters. I had no idea he was half Filipino.
Andrew's father, Modesto, was a former Navy man turned stockbroker. He and Andrew's mother, Mary Ann, raised 4 children together. But Andrew stood out. He had a genius IQ, so he enrolled in the pricey and prestigious Bishop School in the Tony Beach enclave of La Jolla.
When I heard that he was going to La Jolla and transferring to Bishops, I thought, well, you've got to have money. That's a private school.
The class of 1987 mentioned Andrew Cunanan as most likely to be remembered. He chose a quote from King Louis XV to accompany his senior photo, "Après moi, le déluge." After me, the deluge. Turns out those words could have been an omen. A year after Andrew's high school graduation, his father was facing embezzlement charges. He fled the country, leaving his family abandoned and broke.
He was openly gay in high school and very flamboyant. And
when 48 Hours first spoke to Nicole Murray Ramirez back in 1997, he knew Andrew Cunanan. Today, he still remembers Cunanan as the young man who didn't have a job, but was a big spender and an even bigger talker.
Andrew Cunanan was basically known in the gay community's nightlife and the bar scene. He would walk in with an entourage and always pay for the bill. He wanted the illusion that it was his money. He tried to brag that he came from a Filipino family and he knew the Imelda Marcos.
Michael Williams owned a local restaurant and knew Andrew Cunanan. He also knew where Cunanan really got all that money.
He had a very wealthy older partner who really provided for him.
How much older?
I would say probably by 40 years.
What did you make of that relationship?
I stopped trying to figure that out. I was like, here's this young, attractive, good-looking guy with this extremely older man. I mean, I can't imagine what the connection was there.
I would imagine that you had an idea what the connection was there.
I did.
Michael Williams was introduced to Andrew through their mutual friend, a young ensign named Jeff Trail.
Andrew was very pretentious, loud, always had to be the center of the party. Jeff was opposite of that. Jeff was pretty conservative and quiet, always helping people.
Trail was an Annapolis graduate and a Gulf War veteran living in San Diego. He was also gay, as out as was possible.
Tonight on 48 Hours, the battle over homosexuals in the military.
In 1993, when he appeared in Silhouette for a 48 Hours interview, he talked to us about issues affecting gay people in the military.
We're not here to be feared. We just want to do our jobs. That's all we're asking for.
While Trail and Cunanan were friends, to the best of anybody's knowledge, that is all they were.
Jeff was always had the contagious personality that where you just wanted to be around him. And I think that, in a way, Andrew wanted that in his life. So surrounding himself around Jeff, he always seemed very happy and up.
You did not like Andrew?
No.
For reasons known only to Cunanan, he sometimes used the name Andrew De Silva. That's how Michael Williams knew him, and he would soon learn a lot more about Andrew. Who he was and what he would do would change the life of Michael Williams and end the lives of 5 innocent victims. Tracing Andrew Cunanan's blood-soaked path to Gianni Versace's front door means following a series of unexplainable events punctuated with unfathomable viciousness. None of the dots are easily connected, except in the mind of the murderer. The road begins with Jeff Trail.
He just had that charisma about him.
It was Trail who befriended Andrew Cunanan, and Michael Williams believes his friend knew Cunanan had lived a dangerous life.
Andrew had a past of dealing drugs. He had a past of prostitution. And I really think that Jeff was trying to pull him out of that.
Williams says Jeff Trail had left the Navy and was training to join the California Highway Patrol. And then, suddenly, and with no explanation, in the fall of 1996, Trail moved to Minneapolis.
The day that he got in the car to leave, I said, please be safe. And he reached under the seat and he pulled out his handgun. And he said, I'm going to be safe. I've got this.
Around that same time, Jeff Trail's friend, Andrew Cunanan, was struggling, according to Nicole Murray Ramirez.
He was not good looking anymore. He had to have looked in the mirror and saw what I saw, which was a 6 going down to a 4. What was left for his life?
Cunanan had gained weight and given away much of his expensive designer wardrobe.
He had dabbled into drugs. He was now an older young man with average looks.
On top of that, his older, wealthy partner broke up with him.
I surmise that Andrew one day woke up after his older boyfriend broke up the relationship. And what's next? How is he going to live?
He lost the money, the mansion, and all that went with it.
He lived off other people. He also was someone who was revengeful.
Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole.
This is not someone that you break up with easily, because when you're grandiose and you're the center of the world, people don't break up with you.
And then, for reasons Cunanan never fully explained, on Friday, April 25th, 1997, he went to Minneapolis. He flew from San Diego on a one-way ticket. Do you think that he went up to Minneapolis with murder on his mind?
Yes, I think that he did.
Cunanan knew people in Minneapolis. Jeff Trail was there. And Michael Williams thinks something happened between the two of them.
I called to check on Jeff, and he was just really depressed. It alarmed me. We'd never had a conversation like that. I asked him, have you spoken to Andrew? And he said, no, and I'll never speak to him again. That's odd.
Cunanan knew somebody else in Minneapolis, a 33-year-old architect named David Madsen. Cunanan and Madsen had had a relationship.
He loved to laugh.
I'm just gonna have a little lunch, okay?
And he always had big energy.
Julie Hovland was David Madsen's friend and co-worker.
He liked problem solving. We talked about world issues. He was a down-to-earth person.
Did David ever mention Andrew Cunanan?
Yes, he did. I think he had a fling with Andrew. I don't think it was anything serious because there were other people in his life that he cared about more. He didn't care about Andrew that much, really.
But according to Cunanan's friends, Andrew believed David was the love of his life. Julie Hovland didn't talk to David Madsen over the weekend. On Monday, she was surprised when he didn't show up at work. And by Tuesday, everyone was worried.
I called him, went to voice messaging, and a couple of my coworkers went to his house over lunch hour on Tuesday, heard his dog barking in the apartment.
She didn't know it, but Cunanan's killing spree had already started.
It was noticeable as soon as you open the door and walk in. Nobody made any effort to try and conceal it or hide it.
When retired Minneapolis homicide detective Dale Barsness arrived at Madsen's apartment, what he saw was gruesome. There was a bloody body wrapped in a rug.
I thought he was dead that day. I pretty much cried the whole night. And then later we found out that it wasn't David's body in the carpet.
How did you feel when you heard that?
Shocked, but then, oh, what happened?
The body in David Madsen's apartment was Jeff Trail. He had been beaten to death with a hammer. And not far from the body, police found a duffel bag with a name on it, Andrew Cunanan.
This is the travel bag that we believe Andrew Cunanan brought to Minneapolis on April 25th.
But where was Andrew Cunanan, and where was David Madsen? The trail stayed cold for just 4 days, and then on Saturday morning, 2 fishermen found the body of a young man on the shores of East Rush Lake, about an hour north of Minneapolis. It was David Madsen. He'd been shot in the head.
We learned that David died pretty soon after Jeff Trail. Oh my gosh, you know, to be in the situation that David's in with this crazy person, you know, and how scary for him. I'm sure he tried to calm Andrew down. You know, I mean, I'm sure there was survival mode going on, like how do you diffuse the situation? But he obviously failed at that, and he lost his life because of that.
Ballistic tests showed the bullets used to kill Madsen came from a .40 caliber gun, like the one Jeff Trail had taken to Minneapolis. Police believe Cunanan took that gun.
Presumably, when you were able to link Madsen's death to Trail's death, that changed the whole investigation.
And now we're down to, where's Andrew?
There were tire tracks near Madsen's body, and his car, a red Jeep, was missing. But it would not stay missing for long.
72-year-old Lee Miglin was found tortured and stabbed to death in the garage of his mansion on Chicago's Gold Coast.
On the morning of May 3rd, 1997, Stephen and Barbara Byer found the body of their neighbor, Lee Miglin. He was a wealthy real estate developer.
I can still picture it today. I could see the points of his shoes. And I said, Lee is right there. I mean, it was absolutely chilling.
Inside Lee Miglin's townhouse, there was some money and other things missing, and there was evidence the killer had stayed a while. Police photos show he had shaved and taken a bath.
Debris in the kitchen sink, melted ice cream coming out of their containers. Then in Lee's library, finding this large ham sliced sitting on his desk. That was plenty to recognize that something very, very bad had gone on.
Around the corner from the murder scene, police would discover David Madsen's red Jeep. But now Lee Miglin's green Lexus was missing. To this day, police do not know what, if any, connection Cunanan had to Miglin. But they feared Cunanan would strike again.
I do know it's not a random act of violence.
A nationwide manhunt is still underway for Cunanan.
After Andrew Cunanan murdered Jeff Trail, David Madsen, and Lee Miglin, the gay community was terrified, especially in San Diego.
I think everybody was in a state of shock. I think some people were in a state of fear. People didn't answer their doors. People that knew him the most stayed other places.
Michael Williams relocated to Scottsdale, Arizona.
Everybody was on very high alert.
Because you didn't know where he was going to strike again.
Yeah.
Just 6 days after he killed Miglin, while Cunanan was on the run in Miglin's green Lexus, police believe he realized the FBI was tracking the car phone's signal, and he needed a new vehicle.
He's believed to have struck here in Pennsville Friday afternoon at the remote Finns Point Cemetery at Fort Mott Park.
FBI is going to work it concurrently with the New Jersey State Police.
The Lexus was found at this cemetery in southern New Jersey. Inside the office lay victim number 4. He was 45-year-old William Reese. He'd been shot in the head, and his red pickup was gone.
Yeah, all he was a caretaker at a cemetery.
Minneapolis Detective Dale Barsness says William Reese was killed simply for his truck.
You know, he just was a very honorable man.
In the wrong place.
Absolutely.
At the wrong time.
And alone.
You're ensconced somewhere in Scottsdale. He's last heard of in New Jersey. Can you relax?
No. Until he's caught, you don't relax.
As Gianni Versace was in Europe working on what would be his final collection, Andrew Cunanan was the focus of a nationwide manhunt. He was featured on America's Most Wanted.
Police say Cunanan may be wearing glasses.
And earned a spot on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list.
You think he enjoyed the attention that he got?
Oh, I absolutely do.
Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole.
He basically held the United States hostage because we were looking for him everywhere. We didn't know where he was.
O'Toole says, having murdered 4 men in 3 states over 12 days, Cunanan was now considered a spree killer.
A spree killer continues and continues and continues and does not go back into their normal life. Life as they know it, it's done.
So O'Toole believes Cunanan knew he had nothing to lose.
There's no way to undo what he's done now. Absolutely no way. So he's really boxed himself into a corner. From a behavioral standpoint, that makes him more dangerous.
But then, for 2 months, there was no sign of Cunanan. Until July 15th, 1997, when he struck again. This time was different, because this time, his victim was Gianni Versace.
When you heard that he had done it again, do you remember how you felt?
Every time there was another killing, it was almost like you're being stabbed, you know? It's that rush of pain, and you're just automatically, oh my God, why can't they catch him?
There's no question that he knew that we were hot on this trail.
Carlos Noriega remembers that within hours, hundreds of police officers piled onto Miami Beach.
We all but locked down the causeways and the ways in and out of the city, and I believe that created that bottleneck where he felt uncomfortable trying to leave the city.
Crime Stoppers.
With all the attention on this case, every day brought a flood of tips.
How long ago?
The tips that were coming in were overwhelming at times.
Especially since this was Detective Gus Sanchez's first homicide investigation.
Were you nervous at all?
Of course I was.
Yeah?
We know already that he had killed numerous people. I remember going to different locations, knocking on doors, and it always crosses your mind that Cunanan can be in there armed, and he can shoot through the door.
Detectives soon learned Cunanan had been in Miami Beach for about 2 months.
He was sort of hiding in plain sight.
Exactly.
The police had missed several opportunities to get him. About a week before he killed Versace, Cunanan pawned a gold coin stolen from Lee Miglin. How'd the pawn shop know it was him? He told them.
Pawned the coin about a week before the homicide.
And used his own name.
Used his own name.
What's more, Cunanan's name was on a form the pawn shop was required to send to the Miami Beach Police Department. It arrived 5 days before the murder.
We did not have an automated system at the time.
It was just one of many forms, and unfortunately, nobody looked at it.
Did you think, why didn't we know about this before Gianni Versace was killed?
That thought went through my mind several times because apparently he was on the beach for a period of time.
Cunanan listed his address as the Normandy Plaza Hotel.
It was a dump. You and I wouldn't stay in that hotel.
He'd registered under his own name.
Must drive you nuts to know that this guy was walking around free as a bird.
Right. I mean, just the fact that this guy was being looked for speaks to the fact that he was able to blend in and change his appearance and successfully just stay one step ahead that way.
Things might have turned out differently if police had a little more luck. 4 days before Versace was killed, someone at this sub shop recognized Cunanan from the America's Most Wanted story. He called the police, but they arrived too late.
I was disappointed. I was frustrated. It's just unfortunate that we didn't catch him before it happened.
After Versace's murder, with Cunanan on the loose, anxiety grew.
Let me assure you that Miami Beach and Dade County are safe.
I was afraid.
Remember, Versace's friend, Lazaro Quintana, had chased Cunanan.
So I told the officer, go get him. He's in there. Go get him. He knew who I was, but I didn't know who he was.
How did you behave when you were out?
Scared, cautious, looking over my shoulder a lot.
Literally? I mean,
absolutely. Oh, yeah, I mean, I get goosebumps on it, absolutely. This man had a gun. This man knew what he was doing.
The longer Cunanan dodged police, the more intense the hunt became.
I think the police were getting anxious. Where could he be? What kind of resources did he have?
Former prosecutor Michael Band.
That's a lot of pressure.
That's a lot of pressure on law enforcement. The whole world's watching, but we don't want anybody else dead.
There was a sense that maybe we lost him by some people. I just thought that he was hiding out.
And then the tip came in that would change everything.
Here we go, guys. Here we go. I get a call. Michael, I think we found him.
What's your emergency? Somebody got him and they're shooting.
I heard over the police radio that there had been a shot fired, that they were surrounding a houseboat.
You think what?
We got him.
After a 9-day manhunt, Miami Beach detective Gus Sanchez believed Andrew Cunanan was finally cornered on a houseboat just 40 blocks from where he had shot down Gianni Versace. When Sanchez arrived, it was a standoff.
At this point, nobody's seen Cunanan on the houseboat.
No, there's no confirmation at this point.
The houseboat's caretaker saw signs of a break-in, and when he went inside, a shot was fired. Police quickly surrounded the houseboat.
They are communicating by bullhorn with the houseboat.
After a 4-hour siege, the SWAT team fired tear gas and went on board. When it was safe, prosecutor Michael Band followed them.
It was a mess. It was just a mess.
In an upstairs bedroom, they found a body.
I just recall an individual lying on the bed, looking up. He had a bullet wound in his head. There's a gun next to him.
When you looked at that face, what did your gut tell you?
My gut told me it's him.
But that wasn't enough.
I wanted his fingerprints.
As Band waited, an expert at the scene compared fingerprints from the corpse with Cunanan's.
He looks up and he says, it's him.
The reign of terror brought upon us by Andrew Cunanan is over.
It turned out Cunanan shot himself with the same gun he used to kill Gianni Versace, William Reese, and David Madsen. It was the gun he had taken from his friend and first victim, Jeff Trail.
There's a sense of relief.
But this was not the outcome Michael Williams hoped for.
I didn't want him to do anything but go to jail and rot.
Andrew Cunanan's suicide left the world with a pile of questions. Was there any connection between Gianni Versace and Andrew Cunanan? There have always been rumors. There is no hard evidence.
Do you think they knew each other?
I think there's a strong possibility that they crossed paths before.
And that plays into his motive. I think so. I think they knew each other. Or he wanted to be in his circle and maybe he was rejected. And this is all speculation.
There is some sense it's not complete. Why'd he do it? What was the folks in Minnesota? Why Chicago? Why New Jersey? Why Versace? Was there a connection there? Was this just some sort of serendipitous, unfortunate occasion where just two lives intersected at the wrong time?
And we'll never know.
We'll never know.
20 years after Versace's death, Tim Gunn says Versace's influence still lives.
Sexy, alluring, gorgeous red carpet gowns, it's all attributable to Gianni Versace.
Singer Bruno Mars not only wears Versace, he mentions Versace in one of his songs. If guys like Bruno Mars are singing about Gianni Versace 20 years after his death, what in your mind does that say about Gianni Versace?
That he's fully embedded in our society and culture and has a profound legacy.
I feel his presence when I'm designing.
Leanna Aguilar, a Project Runway contestant, was just a teenager when Versace was killed. There are Versace elements in what you're wearing today, right?
Yes. Tim Gunn saw this and he said, "This looks like Versace," and I was like, yes, mission accomplished.
Of course, the memories are infinitely more personal for Michael Williams, who lost his best friend. And 2 decades later, it still hurts.
This hasn't left you.
I'm better. It's taken me years. You know, if it was just Jeff being killed, would be one thing. But then you got David and Lee Miglin and William Reese and Gianni Versace. 5 people that you're now connected to.
It is a connection no one would ever seek. The world lost an icon, but 5 families lost loved ones, friends lost friends, all for a reason we'll never know, if there ever was one.
In January of 2000, I was a college freshman at Susquehanna University. I was 18 years old. I was on a second date with Dan Zapp, who was a college freshman at Carnegie Mellon University. My mom had a suggestion for us to just maybe walk around my town, go down to the marina. Dan and I, we just stopped and we're talking. We started picking up some stones and trying to skip some stones. Well, as we were there was a red pickup truck came up and stopped by us. And out comes this guy and he pulls a dog out, Rottweiler. He was asking us if we needed a ride, and we, of course, politely declined. He seemed normal. He got back in his truck, and as we continued walking, this guy must have turned his truck around behind us, and he comes up next to us, off to our right, and blocks our path. He immediately comes out of the truck with a gun pointed at us. He pointed it right at us and said, "Get in the effing truck." And he was dead serious. At that moment, I felt like I had entered a nightmare. It seemed completely unreal. I remember Dan next to me was just saying, here, take my wallet, take my, here are my keys, my car, I can give you my car, there's a laptop in my car. Just started offering like him all these things or whatever, and he's like, no, I don't want those things, get in the truck. It felt like we were driving forever. It felt like an eternity. At this point, this guy was just, ranting and raving. He was just at it, acting crazy, completely crazy. We just didn't want to be hurt, so of course we were just saying, whatever you want us to do, we'll do that. Just please, just let us go. He eventually turned left onto this dirt road. The three of us were standing there next to his truck. The river's in front of us, and he's kind of like pacing back and forth and, has the gun in his hand. And to emphasize his points, he would like shoot the gun, shoot the gun towards the river. Like, I don't know what to do, bang. You guys have seen my face. What am I gonna do with you guys? Bang. When I first heard the gunshot go off, bang, it became more serious. Bang, this guy really has the potential to end my life. I thought we were both gonna die. I just kept thinking about, okay, what can I say to calm this guy down? He was just acting crazy. We could tell that he was really frustrated and agitated and really getting worked up. I just remember huddling next to Dan during that time. When he was shooting his gun, he was shooting it into the river. It was almost as though he was doing it to scare us, and it did. And then eventually he told me to get back in the front of the truck, and he had Dan get in the back with the dog. And I remember sitting in the front of the truck, and he comes in, and he comes into the side, and there we are again, just sitting in the same spot again. Him in the driver's seat, me in the passenger seat, and I had no idea what to expect next. Well, as we were sitting there and waiting, he looks over at me and he says, "So, you said you'll do anything." And right in that instant, I knew exactly what he was talking about. And I knew right then that I was gonna be raped. And I kinda just nodded my head. I didn't want to die. And I definitely do not want Dan to die because of me. So, he did. He raped me. And he took his gun and he kind of pointed it down for us to, he said, go walk down there, which would be walking down towards the river. So Dan and I, grabbed a hold of one another and we started walking down towards the river. And I was praying that he had gotten what he wanted from me, that he was going to to let us go. And then I heard the gun go off again. And then I saw Dan fall down, and he fell down right in front of me. There was blood coming out of his mouth. And I knew that if Dan had gotten shot, I was gonna get shot. I was next. I mean, I immediately kneeled down. And Dan and I, we said, I love you, and we said goodbye to each other. Everything just went black. I don't remember feeling any pain, but I just remember feeling like a lot of pressure in my head. The next thing I remember is waking up and I was in the river, and my whole body was just, I guess, numb. Like I really just couldn't feel anything at all. And I kept, I was spitting out things, you know, so I figured I had been shot in the head, shot through the mouth. In that moment, I prayed with more faith than I have ever had in my whole life. And I just said, please, dear Jesus, just take my soul. Soon after that moment is when I spotted Dan. I remember when I saw him just being, you know, just, oh my gosh, Dan's alive, and just trying to get towards him with like everything I could. And I eventually got to Dan and I grabbed hold of him so tightly. And we looked back at shore where we had been, and we saw this guy just standing there staring at us. I mean, the gun was still in his hand. And I remember Dan saying to me that, well, if we just, you know, if we just play dead, if we just, you know, don't move and just kind of float down, he'll just think we're dead and he'll leave. And eventually, you know, we kept watching him, and we watched him get back in the truck and leave. If I did not have Dan there to guide me, I don't know what I would have done. I mean, he was put there to save my life in that river.
I was sitting in my truck and looked upstream, and I saw two objects coming. I saw that it was two people, and when they got down to me, I stepped in the water and reached out and got a hold of his hand and pulled him into shore. And then I saw that they were both shot in the head. At that point, neither one of them could talk. They were shaking violently. I had to get help at that point. And it happened, the car coming down there, and I stopped them. And I told them what happened, and I said, you gotta go uptown here and get help.
Dispatch 27, can I help you?
Yes, I'm down in where the Gut Road starts. There's two young teenagers down here shot.
At that time, he started to bleed very bad, and he couldn't talk. The blood was choking him, and he just couldn't talk. I thought they'd be lucky if they can make it.
It was the evening of January 8th. I had a phone call that Danny's been shot in the face. I opened the drawer on the way out the door, and I picked up a photograph that I carried in my lap with a cell phone. I wanted part of her with me, and the photograph was the first thing that I was able to find. And I clutched that and kept that with me, talking to the photograph from Harrisburg to to York Hospital. During the drive down, I could only pray that she would be okay. I had no idea if I was going to ever see Danny alive again, would ever get to hold her again.
The drive to the hospital with my mom was really scary because I didn't know what I was going to see. Once I got to the hospital, I didn't know what I was going to hear. I just knew that I immediately had to get there to see how Danny was doing. It was so scary because this was one of my best friends. I didn't know if she was going to make it, and if she did make it, I didn't know how she was going to be, if she was going to be the same person. I met Danny on the first day of freshman orientation at Susquehanna University. One of the first things that I noticed about her was that she was just a really kind-hearted, genuine person, and she had a great personality, and she was just as enthusiastic about college as I was, so I knew that we would get along really well. A couple months into freshman year, a mutual friend introduced Danny to Dan Zapp. She met up with him for dinner, and they had a lot to talk about, and she just really felt like she had a lot of chemistry with this person. And she couldn't wait till the next time they met up. I didn't know how something like this could have happened. I couldn't imagine who would want to do this to the two of them. We saw Danny's mom there in the hospital. She told us all of the details of the injuries. My first reaction was that the two of them were not going to make it. I thought that the shot to each of their heads would kill them.
The most extensive injury on the female patient involved the right lower jaw. The bones were shattered in so many pieces that it looked like Rice Krispies. We noticed tremendous facial swelling. The patient's face and head were almost the size of a bowling ball.
The feeling that I had when I first saw Danny in that condition was this sense of helplessness. I, as her dad, I couldn't fix the problem for her that the dads like to do. And then knowing that my innocent, sweet daughter was laying there in that condition and, you know, asking why. Of course, at the time, nobody had an answer.
The brutality of this crime is beyond explanation. How do you victimize two innocent people, kidnap them, terrorize them, sexually assault the female victim, then shoot them in the head, push them into a river, and leave them for dead? I think everyone was just shocked. Everyone was angry. Everyone was upset. We need to get this guy, and we need to get him now.
Being a father of two daughters of the same age, I was deeply concerned about this case. I told the mother that we would do everything we could, humanly possible, to identify who this was and bring him to justice. This was quite an undertaking, the fact that we had so much area, so much riverfront to explore and look for a crime scene. We were walking pretty much shoulder to shoulder, looking down at the ground in front of us, and within minutes, I came across a large pool of blood that was about 3 foot up from the water's edge. And as I looked down into the water, I saw about 3 shell casings from a 9mm handgun in there.
The clock was running, and we needed to get as much information as we could. I was assigned to go down to York Hospital to attempt an interview with Daniel and/or Danielle. Unfortunately, Danny was in an induced coma, so we were unable to interview her. We learned that Dan was awake, and that we needed to interview him as soon as possible. Dan's wounds at this point were very serious.
The male's medical condition was critical. They were very concerned a blood clot could form and cut the blood supply to the brain.
He was in pain. Any kind of movement that he would make was very painful for him, but he was eager to help us. And being that Dan was unable to speak because he was on a respirator, we got a notepad from the hospital and a pen, and we gave that to Dan, and then we proceeded to ask him questions about the description of the suspect. Dan described the perpetrator as being a white male, 35 to 45 years of age, very drunk, blonde hair. He had a brown hat, blue jeans, and black Nike high-top sneakers. He described the weapon as a black semi-automatic pistol, and the dog, of course, this black Rottweiler named Sam. Dan was able to provide us with information regarding the vehicle as being a beat-up red pickup truck with a white or gray cap. He described items in the back to include a toolbox and an aluminum baseball bat. We were looking for a violent person, someone with knowledge of the area, and this dog. As we started talking with local investigators from surrounding agencies, Mr. Babner's name came up. His record entailed run-ins with police involving alcohol, domestic violence, altercations between himself and others, and he did have a Rottweiler. So it was decided that a photo lineup would be constructed to include a photograph of Mr. Babner. I then took that photo lineup down to Dan, and I asked him, can you help me? And as I had the pictures in my hand, and I'm laying them down in front of him, and Dan's watching as I'm putting the pictures down, and as I get to Mr. Babner's picture, there was an instant reaction in his face of pure horror. His pupil dilated. His one eye was swelled shut, but his other eye, bam, I saw his pupil go, and he immediately just started hitting the picture. He's hitting it on the table. And I said, Dan, is that the man? He said, yes, it's him. And I said, are you sure? He said, yes. And he's, definitely, and he's hitting that. And I looked at him and I said, Dan, we're gonna go get him.
When I was in the hospital, I had one hallucination after the other because of the pain meds. I was flipping out, I was so scared, and the nurses had to come in and calm me down. At one point, I was seeing bloody images everywhere. I saw like a woman hanging with blood running down her face. It was like blood was everywhere.
She would write down on the paper or draw what she saw, floating bodies in the air, bloody faces. It was hard to sit there and again not be able to help, only to comfort her in the best way that I could by holding her hand. I couldn't fight all those demons that she was having inside of her at the time, but I tried.
I notified everybody that we had a positive identification on the suspect. The problem was we didn't know where he was. We looked for him at known associates' houses, residences, anywhere we could possibly find him. We were unable to locate him. It was late. We'd been working all day. We broke. I went home, took my gun off, took my badge off. I remember I was climbing into bed and my pager went off. It was to Chief County Detective. I called him and he said, we found the truck, get back in here.
I had a phone call saying that they were activating the QRT team. The quick response team, which is another word for a SWAT team, is utilized for barricaded gunmen, hostage rescue, and high-risk warrants. This was a special type of criminal, a very, very violent one. We didn't know if he was armed for sure, but we assumed that he still had the weapons that he used to commit this crime. He shot 2 people in cold blood. We weren't going to take that chance that he threw those guns away. We discovered that William Babner was staying at his girlfriend's house. By the time we arrived, it was around midnight. We deployed the team and were set up about a house away. We were in the alley, sort of in the shadows, crouched down, hiding. Snipers were set up to cover the front of the house. Sometime early in the morning, a female left the residence, and she gave a whole bunch of information about who was left in that apartment.
It was learned that at around 8 o'clock in the morning, Mr. Badmer's girlfriend's youngest child would be coming out to get on a bus.
The plan was that once that child got on the bus and that bus started taking off down the road, that we were to assault. We're hearing the snipers looking down at him. Okay, we have an open door. There's a child. There's a man. Yes, it's Babner. He's in the door. We're still waiting, and we're hearing the child's going down the stairs. The child's getting on the bus. Go, go, go. I was about the third man through the door. I grabbed him, and I was yelling, let me see your hands, let me see your hands, and get down to the ground, get down, and physically took him and knocked him to the ground. We cuffed him, and then that was it. He was shocked. It's not every day that you can say you put your hands on a monster, and that's what I did that day.
During the execution of the search warrant, all this stuff that Dan had seen was there. We found the black Nike high-top sneakers, blue jeans, the shirt, the hat, as well as the firearm. And to no surprise to us, Sam was just as Dan had described it. Dan's recollection was just outstanding. You know, we have the who, what, when, where, and how, but not a why. And, you know, I don't think we'll ever know the why.
After Babner was captured, I had a big sigh of relief, but I knew our job was just beginning then. We had to hope for the best for the two kids, that they'd be able to come to the trial and testify against him. I still wasn't sure of the conditions of either one of them.
When I was in the hospital, they put me in an induced coma. While I was in the induced coma, they sewed my tongue. My jaw had been shattered, so they added a plate in my jaw. So when I woke up, I had a tracheotomy, so I had a tube coming out of there. I had a stomach tube when I woke up. I mean, I was bandaged and swollen, like my jaw was like out to here. You know, my mouth was wired shut, my teeth were all dirty, like there was dirt in my teeth. And when I looked at myself in the mirror, you know, it was only, you know, from here on up. But when I looked at myself, I started to cry. I hated what I saw. That first picture that Dan and I ever took together of me and him in my car, it was like right next to me on the bed. I remember watching Dan walk out of the river, but I didn't know what had happened to him since then. I really had this feeling that he had died, that he did not make it. When I woke up from the hospital, I kept asking my family, you know, where's Dan? How's he doing? And my family kept saying, you know, he's alive, he's doing really well, he's right down the hall from you. And I did not believe them. I thought that he had died. And so he wrote me a note, and it said, I love you, I'm okay. And after I saw that, I knew that he was alive. I knew that he made it.
I never had any idea how close I was to dying even after I had been back at the hospital. The bullet entered back here. There's a tiny lump behind my ear. And it went straight through my windpipe and out of my jaw, and it exited over here. It wasn't until much later that I heard how the bullet had chipped one of my vertebrae, how the bullet had passed straight through my windpipe. You know, if the bullet would have been another inch or a few millimeters closer to my vertebrae, I could be dead or paralyzed. When I saw the picture the first time, I was scared at first to see his face again, but I was extremely excited, just extremely relieved that I had found him. I knew that this was him. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was the guy who had shot us. And whether he admitted it or not, these are things that he had done, and he was going to have to pay for them.
Nobody wanted to take this case to trial. And we certainly didn't want to have Dan and Danielle go through this experience, but he left us no choice. He just wouldn't admit his guilt. He wanted his day in court for whatever bizarre and sick reason, and he got it. Danielle and Dan were both very emotional before the preliminary hearing when they entered the courtroom for the first time. We just tried to tell them they were going to be safe. He could do nothing further to harm them.
I was terrified to see him again. I mean, he was a monster to me. I did not want to be in the same room with him.
I felt just full of fear again. You know, that face had just instilled so much panic inside of me.
Babner did not testify at trial. I don't recall him calling any witnesses. He had nothing. He had nothing but his arrogance. He just sat there, and it was almost like he either wanted to have Dan and Danielle relive this by recounting what happened in a public forum, or he just frankly didn't care. When Dan and Danielle were testifying at trial, it was completely silent in the courtroom. You could have heard a pin drop.
When I was up there on the stand, I mean, there were times where I had to break down. I mean, they had to show me, you know, all the evidence so I could point out. I mean, they showed me the clothes that were cut off of me. So it was the first time seeing that. And there was like mud splattered all over them. You know, the gun, is this what the gun looked like? It was a really hard experience, you know, to sit there and share that with everybody. And I knew that, you know, my family was sitting there. So I knew like all the details I was sharing, especially about the rape, my family was hearing it too.
The amount of courage that Danielle showed during that trial was unbelievable because she had to tell total strangers some of the most intimate details that she could ever possibly have to relate to anyone. Dan saw the crime from a different perspective than Danielle, so the jury was very interested in what Dan had to say.
I was trying to come up with any plan to get us out of that situation, and I started to try to plead with him, and I said, you know, sir, I'll give you anything you want if you just let us go. He just told me to shut up. He said, shut up, I don't want to hear it from you. At some point, I realized that they're starting to move around up front. I realized that he's raping her. That was really hard to know that something that terrible was happening to someone that I cared about. And I was that close, but I couldn't, there was nothing I could do about it. After he had raped Danielle, he motioned with the gun and he said, walk down there. You know, walk down by the river. The real gravity of the situation started to hit me. I started to realize that I'm going to die today. That no matter what I try to do, this man is going to kill me. And today is going to be the last day of my life. And all of a sudden, I just felt this tremendous force, this impact that just hit me and knocked me right to the ground. And it was so sudden and it was so powerful that my mind couldn't even catch up to it. I wasn't even sure what had happened until I hit the ground. I didn't even know that I'd been shot. And I was just sort of laying there looking at the dirt, and I realized that there's like blood coming out of my mouth. I started to get really cold and I started to get really tired very fast. And she kneeled down and she was obviously upset, and I just said to her, I said, Danny, I'm sorry, I have to go now. And the next thing that I remember is this feeling of being rolled, of my body like sort of turning end over end. And then all of a sudden this shock of of cold, of like freezing cold as I hit the water. And so I just started to like float in the water and sort of drift downstream with the current. It was right around that point that I noticed that Danny was right there too.
I don't know what I would have done if Dan was not there. Dan was my lifesaver. In that river, I remember at one point our hands separated from each other and I could not move on my own. And Dan, you know, he felt my hand slip from his and he turned back around and he swam back out and he grabbed me and he pulled me to shore. I do not believe I would have survived without him.
Dan will never admit this, but he truly is the hero of the entire case. He was constantly thinking, he was constantly encouraging. Without Dan, Babner has no face and is not apprehended. You know, without Dan, Danielle isn't able to swim in the water. Dan kept both of them alive.
It's still tough. I still don't consider myself a hero in any sense. But I'm glad I was there. And I'm glad that, you know, if me being there meant that, you know, she survived, then I'd do it again. I'd do it 1,000 times.
When the verdict came, I remember sitting next to Dan, and I was holding onto Dan's hand, and he was charged guilty on all accounts, you know, on everything that he was charged with. I mean, I just remember afterwards, like this flood of relief just going through me.
William Babner was convicted of 2 counts of attempted murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, 1 count of robbery, 3 counts of involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, 1 count of rape. His sentence was 117.5 to 235 years in a state correctional institution. William Babner is the face of evil. Next time Babner is going to get out of prison, he's going to be in a box.
Danielle and I stayed in touch after the incident, and we tried to talk occasionally, but our relationship wasn't anything like it was before. It was like every time that I talked to her, I had to bring up the past all over again. I had to think about all the things that I thought I had done wrong, all the ways that I couldn't save her and I couldn't get us both out of that situation. And most of the time I couldn't stand it. And over a period of time, I started to pull further and further away.
Transitioning back to being at college was really hard for me. I really struggled with being around men that were strangers to me.
At first, she was a little withdrawn. You know, she was very scared. She didn't want to walk alone at night. She did have a lot of nightmares. And it was upsetting for all of us because we really wanted to help her. And we didn't want her to be scared or sad, but with the circumstances, there really wasn't any other way. That's how she was.
I knew, though, in the back of my mind that there was still a lot that I had to do personally in order to, again, feel as though I could, live again.
4 months after Babner was convicted, we had Take Back the Night on the Susquehanna University campus. And what Take Back the Night is a rally against rape. Everybody can attend and they can get up and speak about their experience with rape or violence.
And I saw all these brave women, walk up to the microphone and just share, I'm a rape survivor, and share parts of their story. It was just so inspiring and so empowering that they had a voice that they were able to share.
There was about 10 minutes of silence. Nobody was getting up to speak, and Danny got up to speak, and we knew that she was going to tell the whole story, and we knew that she was going to share this with everybody. And that was probably the most emotional moment for all of us, because you could kind of see the bravery in Danny and the growth that she was making and how strong she was. She just got up there and she told the whole story, and it just really moved everyone, and it really moved all of us. And we were so proud of her. We were really, really proud of her.
I felt so much power and so much strength, and a part of what I felt he had taken from me, I was able to pull back and say, you know what, he may have taken, you know, a few things, but there's so much that he didn't take, that he couldn't touch, and that is what makes me who I am.
I think that it took me a lot longer than it should have to get to a more comfortable place in dealing with the incident and talking about it and looking at it from a healthy perspective. I knew that I should be getting therapy, you know, I should be dealing with it. I just really didn't want to. I wanted to try to ignore it and just hope that eventually it went away. In the last 8 years, I feel like I've grown up a whole lot. Regarding the incident, my perspective has almost entirely changed. Danielle and I really reconnected over the past couple of years. We've really started our relationship over from where it kind of ended, and we're really close now, and I consider her a great friend.
Dan met an amazing woman at college who has been such a great companion for him. She has definitely helped him to get to that next level in his own survival and healing. They got married in 2007.
I feel like everything's kind of going in the direction that I always wanted it to go, and I'm just really happy for everything that I have right now.
In spring of junior year, I introduced Kevin McGuire to Danny. And they connected instantly and dated, fell in love, and he proposed to her just a couple years later. The police chief and the men who rescued Dan and Danny, including the duck hunter, were all guests at the wedding as well.
Danny looks absolutely wonderful. She is just doing great and looking great, and extremely proud of her.
I'm so happy that I have made it to where I am today. The gratefulness that I have for my beautiful baby girl and the husband that I have. I don't have to think about what happened to me every day. It doesn't define me anymore. I have learned how to make it a part of who I am, but it has made me a better person.
Danielle and I are forever entwined. That's like a connection that no one can ever take away from us. She's always going to be a part of my life.
It's as though like our souls are almost connected. He will be a part of my life forever.